I'm very happy to be talking to the very gallant Samantha Baldwin tonight. Her case will strike a lot of people as almost unbelievable, and perhaps at one point before I started to be involved in these matters and campaigning for people who have been abused by the system, I might have thought that myself, but I recognise in her story echoes of so many that I've worked on, and even the very shocking parts of it, sadly, I've come across many times before, and know that these things do go on. They are surprisingly common, and they are being covered up by the authorities. And we need to give a platform and an ear to people like Samantha who have gone through very tragic circumstances and have nonetheless not been defeated by them, but have the courage, the strength, and the self-possession to speak out and to communicate their story to the wider public. So this is probably going to be the first of a series of interviews, because the story is too big to fit into one. So I hope that those listening will stick with us. We'll come back for subsequent parts of this story and piece together exactly how the system is working and exactly the nature of the abusive elements within it that we are fighting. So I'll hand over to Samantha now. And maybe, Samantha, you could start with an outline of when you first realised something was wrong. What was the first inkling that things within your family were not the way they should be?
Well, it was, so I was married to a master of disguise, basically. He pulled the wool over my eyes. At the beginning, he was probably more charming than anyone I'd been out with at that point. I was in my mid-20s. He was in his late 20s. I met him through friends, so I just assumed that, you know, if you meet someone through your friends, they'll be fine. And there was nothing suspect in the relationship. Only in hindsight there was, but there was nothing suspect at the beginning. And he basically swept me off my feet in a lot of ways. And then we got married. And then I had my first child. He's now just turned 13, a boy. And that was in 2007 when I had him. And again, didn't notice anything was wrong for a while until he got to age, I don't know, when he was a toddler, actually. So they started off, the first thing was that he would, when I took him out to play areas, he would hit other babies a lot, and it got really stressful because it carried on for ages and got to the point where I just wasn't looking forward to taking him out. And then I got pregnant with my second son in 2010. And then my eldest son, his behaviour really started to get very concerning. He developed a really severe stammer. He would seem down a lot of the time, quite depressed, low of mood. And then he didn't want his father to put him to bed. He'd start screaming. And so I would put him to bed. He started having nightmares, gone from being a previously good sleeper, started having nightmares and night sweats. He'd get like drenched almost. And then he'd come into my bed. And then at some point, my husband ended up moving out of our bedroom and going to sleep in the spare room, it was a big house. It was at the other end of the corridor upstairs. And he started sleeping in there. And he said, oh, it'll help you out. I'll get up with my eldest son in the morning, you know, and that kind of thing. So, and then during my pregnancy, he started to behave really badly, my husband, and I just thought, this is just awful. He's just going out all the time. I just thought, I may as well be single. This just isn't working. It's just not nice. And then when but I didn't ask him to leave because I was pregnant. It was just bad timing. So I thought, well, I'll just try and stick it out. and maybe he'll change when the second child is born. And then I had another son. He was born. He's now 9.5, and he was born in February 2011. And then my husband is like, he's just started going out even more, really ramping it up, going out all the time. In the meantime, I have a newborn. My eldest son is doing really badly at school, and the concern with him at school, the SENCO, the Special Educational Needs Coordinator, they said, we're going to get an educational psychologist. We don't know what to do with him. We're concerned. He can't concentrate. So, and then when my youngest was 3 months old, I actually asked my husband to leave. It was just looking back now, I think he did it all on purpose to get me to ask him to leave, so he could be on his own with the boys. So, but at that time, I was just in a spin trying to look after my children, juggling, being a mother, looking after a toddler and a newborn baby, and then so basically we went our separate ways. I stayed in the house, put the house on the market because it was too big and unaffordable, but put the house on the market. He then moved in with a couple of his gay friends for a few weeks, and then shortly after that he moved in with another friend. And then after that, he moved in with a man that he would then stay living with for a few years. And they're both businessmen. They make quite a lot of money. There was no need for them to be living together for financial reasons. So this man he knew from work, they worked in the same trade. My ex-husband had his own business, but he was working within this industry. Well, I'll just say he was working in the carpet industry. And so this was another man he met, he knew from there. And then he wanted to have the boys overnight, and so he did. He was having them overnight. But then my eldest son started to scream when he was going with him and get really distressed and just be like, no, and just run around the house, trying to just, I'd literally have to drag him kicking and screaming and almost force him to go with his father. And I think at the time I was just trying to convince myself, maybe he's attached to me because, maybe it's, but it was just getting worse and worse. And in the meantime, my husband was just becoming very difficult, very nasty, making threats, telling me that I'm a bad mother because I should be making them and we're the boss and it shouldn't be up to the children, and, I'm too soft, blah, blah, blah. And so that, and then my eldest son, he developed really horrific attachment issues. He wouldn't let me out of his sight. And it then got to the point in 2013 where he'd scream about going in school. And I just thought, literally, I can't be dragging a 6-year-old into school. He was just... So I thought, well, I'll have to homeschool him. It wasn't part of my plan, but I just decided to homeschool him because it was just too horrific trying to drag a 6-year-old child into school, literally. And I thought, right, well, I'll take him to forest school. I'll leave him there a couple of days. I'll looked at all these options. But it was just as bad as going to forest school, and they were very much child-centred, and, it was lovely there, but it was like, it was getting worse. Nothing was working. And everything was really stressful. And there was also a few physical things that were very concerning as well. My eldest, I noticed when I was giving him a bath one day, he had these blistery things on his bottom, like warty kind of thing, bumps. And I was like, so I took him to the doctors. And they were also around his anus as well. And I went to the doctors and they said it's something called molluscum contagiosum. And just sent me away basically and said, you just need to keep the area moisturised, they'll come off on their own. But what the doctor didn't tell me, and it only takes a quick, just to do a bit of research, is that these can also be sexually transmitted. But at that stage, because children get it from child to child, but what I know is that you can get it on the trunk of the body, that's common. but not in such a localized location as it was on my son's, you know, around his anus and his buttocks. But again, it's nothing of that kind is on my mind, nothing sexual abuse, nothing like that was on my mind at the time. There was also a time when his father dropped them off, and he just dropped them off, and it was I think it was about July, again, 2013. And my eldest son just looked at me and said, "Mummy, I've just weed out of my bum." And I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean, sweetheart?" And my husband was there saying, "Oh, that'll be a wet fart." And I was like, "What?" It just didn't make sense. And I was just like puzzled. And so he changed his underpants, and they just looked damp. And it was just one of those things that I now look back and I know what that was now. But so, is there anything else? There was another thing. He had a tic. So he developed this. My eldest son developed this really severe facial tic. He was like almost like pulling his face, and I'd be like, "Are you okay?" And it was just a mess. Just behaviorally, emotionally, just turned into. And I was just, you know, looking for all these different remedies and solutions and stuff, and not looking at the root cause. You know, what is causing this? So that just carried on. And then my youngest son's getting a bit older, and then he started to scream about going with his father as well when he got to about 2 and 3. And he'd really scream and didn't want to go with him. It was just awful. So then 2014, we finally sold the house that had been on the market for 3 years. And then with the money that I had, I got my own house and lived to move further towards my family, which was near Rochdale. We were in Stretford at that point in South Manchester. And then we just got our own house, and felt like really nice, you know, just have a fresh start, have my own place and not have that link to him, that marital home. And again, it was like, oh, well, once the boys are happy, this will, you know, life will be good, blah, blah, blah. And then, so we got settled there, and within a few weeks, it was Tuesday, the 2nd of December. And as usual, I've been trying to teach Louis. He was basically crying this morning because he was struggling to form 2-letter words, and he was age 7 at this point, and he was really struggling, but just getting really upset as well. It was just, my mum came round and she says, "Well, do you want to come to mine? The client has just cancelled." So she basically took him, and I spent the day with my youngest one. We went out for hot chocolate, and then I came back, and then I remember my mum ringing me at about 6 p.m. and she just said, my eldest son, she said he's just said his daddy touches him on the willy and bum while he plays the Xbox. And I was like, what? I was just in shock. And then I think I remember screaming, and that's it. I blanked out about that evening. I don't remember anything else, but it was like, and those next few days, everything just kind of began to click into place. It was like the final piece of the puzzle. That's what's causing it.
When children are exposed to trauma like this, the distress is such that there's a lot of mental shutdown. So things like schooling, you know, do very often just become impossible because there's something else in their head, and they're constantly trying to deal with the trauma.
Yeah.
A pitiable position.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also the shutting off. They try to compartmentalize it so that there's still some sort of life remaining.
Yeah.
And that causes great distress because there's so much that they find difficult to bring to mind. I've got some feedback on this from people who are clinically involved with people with complex trauma. Yeah. The difficulty of actually bringing memories to mind when they're so they're so traumatic is hugely it's a huge problem. But this obviously was in some ways a major breakthrough, because telling, I know from the Holly Gregg case, there was lots of threats made to Holly about what would happen, what her father would do if she told. And the pressure that's applied to children is to maintain the secret is very coming from a normal, loving parenting background is unimaginable. And yeah. I completely understand. You're not looking for this. You're not looking for it. You're not looking for it, and then it's there. So once you'd kind of recovered some sort of equilibrium with that news, how did you handle that? How did you kind of process that and start to act?
Well, it's funny, just to kind of reflect on what you just said then about the threats. That was the next thing he said. He said, I didn't say anything because Daddy said, if we tell anyone, you'll never see Mummy again. And he said, I love Mummy so much, so that's why I didn't say anything. And then, yeah, so I just, but so basically at that point, I never thought, it was like a black cloud over our lives. It was like being in constant pain, constant emotional pain. And I never thought that would go. And then it started to ease after a few months, actually. And I saw the boys change. The progress they made was just amazing. They gradually started to improve. But
yeah, so let's explore this, because this is very interesting. So you I take it your reaction was there's no contact now?
Absolutely, yeah. So at that point, we took about a week to go to the police, and now I really regret going to the police. I mean, I think we would have had to have gone to the police eventually, but knowing what I know now, I would tell no one to go to the police immediately. You know, they don't listen to children. They don't investigate properly. So you'd have to do your own investigation first to obtain the evidence to give to the police.
Yeah, I mean, this was where I came in with Robert Greene, because he pressured the police to re-investigate the Holly Gregg case, which hadn't been properly investigated. And the re-investigation didn't involve speaking to any of the accused. Didn't involve any inspections of any homes or any computers. And then he turned around and said, well, there's insufficient credible admissible evidence, and therefore the matter's closed.
If they would conduct a full house search, it's like if they'd have done that with him, I don't think I'd be sat here now. I think I'd have my children, because they would have found all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, this is the problem. If they don't look for evidence, they won't find any.
No, they basically just said, oh, can we have your phone and your laptop? Well, he's not stupid enough to be putting child abuse images and all the rest of it on his laptop. He would have another one. But also they would have found other stuff like the drug equipment. They were later, the drugs that were found.
So you shut off contact. So the abuse stopped, right?
Yes.
Right, and then so how did your children change at that point? How did they? Did you start to see healing going on, recovery?
Yeah, definitely. The trauma, the severe trauma was so apparent in my eldest son at that point that it was a few weeks, and then gradually things started to change. He'd have these awful episodes. I can't really describe them. They were just, it was like, it was almost like he was completely dissociating, and then afterwards he couldn't remember these episodes that he'd have. And so they kind of stopped gradually. But what I noticed in my youngest son, he wouldn't be as angry. My youngest son had a lot of anger. With my eldest son, it had kind of gone beyond that. And but But my eldest son was able to engage in conversation better. He looked like a child with severe ADHD when he was being abused. And he could actually sit down and have a two-way conversation and actually listen and then talk, you know, instead of interrupting all the time. And they were just smiling more, and they were more relaxed and less anxious, and, you know, it was heartwarming to see the progress that they've made.
Yeah, I understand, yes.
Yeah.
So, from previous cases, what normally then happens is when the immediate pressure is removed and the immediate threat is removed, the child very often starts to give more information. Is that what happened in your case?
Yeah, they both disclosed, because my youngest son obviously picked up on something, and but he started to disclose as well. And basically the month of December was just full of disclosures. And so basically my youngest son, he started to disclose quite early, but we couldn't make much sense of them because he was telling us about this satanic ritual abuse aspects. And it was a 3-year-old describing people in cloaks and things, and we just didn't understand what it was just, whereas my eldest son was talking more about the sexual abuse and the physical abuse, and the people involved. So quite quickly we knew there was other people involved. So within a few days my eldest son was saying which people were involved, and that also involved my husband's parents as well, the pair of them, grandma and granddad, who my eldest son said were worse than daddy. He said grandma's worse than daddy, but granddad is he's the worst of all. And basically they would abuse them when they lived in a different part of the country. They lived in Devon, and his mother was a nurse, and so she'd basically say, so my eldest son was saying they did all the same bad things as daddy did. He talked about one time where his daddy shouted him upstairs. I think it was on a Christmas day, because he had them the Christmas of 2013, so he would have been talking about the previous Christmas, because this was Christmas 2014 at this point. And he was saying daddy shouted him upstairs, and he basically raped him. And but his grandma knew what was going on, because she said, if you tell anyone, you'll never see your entire family and your pets ever again. And then basically they were all involved, and yeah, he later told, he gave some more detail about the drugs, and that was after the police investigation, if you can call it that. But yeah, she was basically giving them drugs as well.
So it's interesting you mentioned pets again, because that's another echo of the Holly Gregg case, because that's the threat that her father used was, if you tell anyone, I'll kill the dogs. Oh
yeah, they just
and anything that the child's close to is used as a weapon.
Yeah.
So you went to the police.
Yes.
What was that like? What was the kind of initial interview? Were they sympathetic? Were they hostile? What was the initial reaction?
Well, so the initial when they first came to take a statement, it was literally after just a couple of disclosures. So we were in a mess, we'd not slept, so we were just basically relaying what the boys had said. And then he said, right, I'll organise to get the eldest son interviewed. So he was ABE interviewed the day after, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. The woman was very brash with him. She said, I'm not here to be a friend. And she was basically telling him to sit still. I didn't see the interview until 16 months later, because you're not allowed, they wouldn't allow me to go in, or they wouldn't allow me even to watch from the observation room. So I didn't actually see what he said until much later.
Did they have another adult with? There's normally interviewing a child, I thought there was always another adult to kind of represent the child's interests in the interview.
Oh, it's shocking. Oh, they were just a policewoman. That's it. It was a 7-year-old child just with a policewoman. And so she was like, come on then, what have you got to say? And he actually told her what he told us about his father touching him on his, he said, willy and bum. And then he said a few other things. He said that about the threats that his father would made. And he also said that he felt like his father made him feel like it was his fault, like he'd done something wrong, which is classic, I think, you know. But I think they shouldn't have carried out that interview. They did it too quickly, because they should have had a child psychologist present, and they also should have established rapport between the policewoman or the police and my son, instead of just wheeling it straight in. There you go. You know, instead there was nothing. It was all done all wrong. So anyway, his father was arrested that evening because he'd said, basically described sexual abuse. His father went in and basically...
Which police force, sorry?
Greater Manchester Police. Okay. And this was Rochdale.
Just as an aside, one of the charities in Scotland, Dundee, that deals a lot with satanic ritual abuse cases, they're now getting quite well known, and they've got people coming from all over the country. They had one woman come up from the Manchester area, and when they got to the "do we go to the authorities" question, she said, "I'm quite happy to talk to the police, as long as it's not Greater Manchester Police, any police force in the country but them."
Oh, yeah.
So there was obviously a lot of experience behind that statement.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's just, we couldn't have had worse, with the occasional decent person, but with not much influence, unfortunately. But this particular copper who interviewed my husband, I saw it 60 months later through the family court, and it was more like a cosy cup of tea, like a chat over. It was nothing. It wasn't crossing. I've had police, thanks to all of this. I've been arrested, so I know what police questioning should be like, and the cross-examining and everything. He didn't have any of that.
So he was arrested, and then he was arrested for child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And the interview was super soft.
Yeah, really soft. He just said, "Do you fancy children?" or something like that. Are you attracted to children? So at this stage, we just had the visit from the police officer who'd interviewed him the day or two later. And I could see as soon as he came in, I thought, he's been taken in by him. And he said, "Oh, he doesn't look like a paedophile. I've seen a few paedophiles and he doesn't seem like one." And he said, "Anyway, children can say these things when parents split up." And I'm thinking, I don't know anyone whose children have said that when parents split up. And he said,
I've come across this argument before in one or two places. It doesn't make any sense, because the children are innocent. Children do not have the knowledge to make this up.
Exactly. They would have had to have experienced it or seen it.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's just so shocking. But yeah, he just basically just said, you remind me of my ex-wife. And then he said something, because I've been in sight of some of his web searches, because I looked at this laptop that he'd given me. And since the disclosures, I thought I'll have a good look at that, because my sister told me you could actually see someone's Google searches if they've logged onto Gmail using the email. So we had a good look through. And there were some very disturbing things. You might have seen my video that I've done about my ex-husband's disturbing Google searches. But anyway, he was basically searching for teen escorts in Manchester. He was looking up paedophile news stories a lot, and then he'd go straight onto a porn site immediately after. That was his pattern. So the family court have seen all this, and they just said, "Oh, it's legal." Nothing was done. So included in all of this, there's quite a lot of postcodes that he would put in, and sometimes he would put these postcodes in up to 2 or 3 times a day. We still haven't got to the bottom of it, why these postcodes were in, but I think he was maybe meeting people at these places. He knew how to drive to them, because one of the postcodes was an office location. It was actually a place where the boys were abused as well. And so I think that he was possibly sending this postcode out to different people and saying, "This is where we're meeting." because why would he keep putting a postcode in for places that I knew how to get to? But one of them was an address in Haywood, and we told the police, and he said it's a known address, and we were like, well, he wouldn't tell us what it was known for though. But I said, well, what if it's paedophiles? And he said it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean to say that your ex-husband is a paedophile if he's going to visit paedophiles. So I still don't know what it is, whether it's what crime, that particular house is known for. So after that meeting, I just thought, I can't work with this man. He made a few other comments as well, highly inappropriate. And so we told the detective inspector at Rochdale, and she said, we'll get someone else on the case. Weeks went by, and the disclosures are getting worse and worse, and the disclosures are now including rape. They're including other people, beatings. It's just horrific. It was appalling. And in that time, we'd not had another police visit. No one had come round. And the boys hadn't even been offered sexual health checks at that point either, but because we didn't know about, you just don't, bearing in mind we're hearing all this stuff, we're not thinking, right, we need to get the boys checked. Because by the time they were checked, 5 weeks had gone by, and you meant to get them done within 2 weeks apparently. So yeah, and in the meantime, the disclosure getting worse. And then I never forget, on Christmas Day, my youngest son is playing with his Octonauts toys, aged 3 years old at that point. And he just looked up and said, Daddy, weed in my mouth. And then he said, and then Daddy put my pull-up on, and then a weed out of my bum. I tried to stop it, but I couldn't. I tried to concentrate, but it just came out, so he's describing that same thing that my eldest son described that time, and I didn't know what it was talking about. And it's just getting worse and worse. There's satanic ritual abuse elements, some really horrific stuff that I haven't even said publicly yet, but just, I'd never heard about satanic ritual abuse at that point, but it didn't take much to realise that what it was, and that it's something called satanic ritual abuse. And around that, I think shortly after, a few weeks after that, Gabriel and Elisa, the Hampstead children, they were describing some of the things that my children were describing, although they gave a lot more detail. They were slightly older. They were they were about age 8 and 9, so they were older than my eldest and a lot older than my youngest child. But yeah, different people were mentioned. And then it was Daddy's band. And that was Easter, I think that was. But at that point, I thought we'd heard the disclosures, but they still hadn't finished. There'd been a bit of a gap, and then it'd been triggered at Easter because of chocolate. And then my eldest son said about Daddy used to give us chocolates and sweets when they did bad things to us, and the band. And I thought, oh my goodness, the band. And so there was not all of the band, but various band members of this band would abuse them as well. And they talked about various aspects that just sound like satanic ritual abuse with these people, and just horrific things, and you're just thinking, this is just too, and you just think, this is just too much. I can't hear this anymore. This is just too much. We have to get out of this town, basically. So we did move out of the town shortly after we left. There was me and the boys, and then my mum, and then my sister. We all located to Nottinghamshire. We got my sister moved in with her partner, and we just rented houses. We just abandoned everything, abandoned our houses. My mum abandoned her career, and because it was just like a nightmare, because nothing was being done. The boys. My eldest son even described the office location. This was around the same time as the disclosures about the ban. This was in April. And the police wouldn't even look at the CCTV. They said, oh, we need to hear it from the children. It's like, well, they've described this. They're only like 3 and 7. Will you just check it out, please? Have a look at the CCTV. Why Why would they be making that up? Why would I make it up? Why don't you just go and check it? Just do your job and just investigate.
Yeah, this is what we found before in other cases. There is no investigation. There's no evidence because they refuse to seek evidence. It's a very bizarre thing.
Yeah. Oh, and that point as well. That I forgot the main point as well, David. My eldest son started talking about injections. So this was like just before Christmas. He started saying, "Daddy would do with a little injection." And
is this almost a year after the first disclosure then when this came out?
No, sorry. So this was literally 3 weeks after the first disclosure. This is going back to December 2014, and he mentioned about these injections. And so that I think the first disclosure about the injections was on the 22nd of December, and so finally we got allocated this. Well, we didn't get allocated the police because I decided to go to the doctors on New Year's Eve because no one was offering us a sexual health check. So I just thought, I'm just going to have to go to the doctors. She said, "Oh, well, I can't organise it. It's have to be social services." So we were visited by another police woman who was actually all right that evening, and then social services. And I told her about these injections. She spoke to my eldest on his own. He told her quite a lot. Through that, my husband's parents and two of his friends the parents were cautioned at their house in Devon, and the two of his friends in Chorlton, they were arrested. And she said, "Well, I'll book the sexual health checks for the 6th of January and we'll get the hair samples taken," because at that point we were wondering if the boys were drugged because my eldest son was talking about injections. So the doctor took the hair samples and then put them in sealed bags to send to the police. In the meantime, my eldest son, because he disclosed so much more, they had him in for another interview, and my youngest son had his one and only interview, which was a play interview. This is at the end of January 2015. Bearing in mind, I didn't see their interviews. I only saw them 16 months later due to the family court. I only saw them in 2016. My eldest son gave so much detail about being injected during the interview, more than he'd ever told us. He gave such detail. He said who'd done it. He said where the injection equipment was kept, which was in the loft. He said there was another person there, which was the housemate, the other man, the businessman. And he even slumped down on the sofa to demonstrate the effects. He said it felt like a very, very, very thin needle, like a mosquito bite. So that's so much evidence. He gave all that detail. The police didn't test the boy's hair then. They said it didn't meet with the requirements. But yeah, I didn't know he'd just... so they didn't test.
Yeah. And you look at the failures, right? And one failure you can think, well, it might be incompetence. And two failures, it might be incompetence and inexperience and incredulity. But when you see things like that, the reasonable person would look at that and start to say, well, they're not doing their job in such a blatant way that this is a decision not to do the job. This is a willful act not to do the job, because the default would be child evidence of being drugged. We have a hair sample. Test the hair sample. I mean, it's a surely you would think an automatic reaction.
You would.
And with that not being done, it does start to beg the question as to why it wasn't done.
Exactly, because it was just shocking. And I didn't push. I'd not seen my eldest son's interview. I didn't push it at that stage because I'm traumatized, and then it was just left. But then as soon as I saw the interview in 2016, and then at that stage we'd contacted ICSA, and then they had reopened the case with another officer, and it was only him who authorised it. I asked him, I said, "Have you still got the hair samples?" And he said, "Yes, they're still in the forensics from January 2015. I said, "Why wasn't it tested?" And they said it didn't meet with the requirements. But something very sinister went on as well, because that policeman who was inappropriate, I complained about him, and I think they just made it 10 times worse then, and his superior, and they were just basically out to get us, and they were just in support of the father then. I've seen evidence on the paperwork. There's lies about when he last saw them. He was trying to say that my ex-husband last saw them in August, when it was actually December the 1st, you know, the day before the disclosures. So automatically they're then trying to say it doesn't meet with the requirements, you know, i.e. with the hair samples.
Oh, I see. I was wondering what didn't meet with the requirements meant. Yeah. So they're talking about duration, actually timescale.
Yeah, but obviously it did, because with hair you're supposed to leave it a month before you get a sample. Well, it was about a month. If you think about when they last saw the father, 1st of December, up to getting the hair samples taken on the 6th of January, there you go. Any drugs would then be in the hair, and then the hair's like a calendar. And sure enough, they had hair from root to tip.
Okay, well, so this might be a point just to pause the story here, right? So you've taken us up to sort of early 2015?
That's right, yeah.
You've started to interact with the police, and you've been directed towards social services.
They were all right at that point, social services. They were actually fine. It was mainly the lack of the police investigation at that point.
Okay. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for talking to me tonight. We'll pick this up, I hope next week, and we'll get the next installment, because it's not possible to tell these stories in a short chunk. It becomes just too rapid fire, and
yes, yeah.
And I think it's to understand what's really going on. It has to be a little more space for you to tell your story. So I'd be delighted if you come back and take us through the next piece. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
You're very welcome.
Until next week.
Yes.
Bye for now.